It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I was about to marry the man of my dreams in a luxury estate, surrounded by friends, family, and all the grandeur that came with such a lavish wedding. But instead, it turned into something far darker, and my world turned upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. I had been with Jack for 3 years. He was charming, successful, and came from a wealthy family. His family's estate was an enormous mansion, and everything about him screamed perfect. I thought I knew him better than anyone else, but as I walked into that house on the morning of our wedding day, everything changed. It was early, the sun barely rising, and the air had a Christmas to it. I had just arrived at the estate, ready to prepare for the big day. The wedding coordinator had arrived hours before, and the bridal suite was already buzzing with activity. Dresses, flowers, makeup artists, it was chaos, but the good kind. I was in my element, excited, but also slightly nervous, as most brides are before a wedding. Jack had gone to the mansion the night before to stay with his family, and I hadn't seen him since. The plan was to meet him at the altar, where everything would be perfect. Or so I thought. But as I was getting ready, I saw something odd text message on Jack's phone. It wasn't the typical wedding day stuff. No. This one was from an unknown number. Curiosity gnawed at me. My heart skipped a beat, but I brushed it off. I was about to marry him. There was no need for doubts. However, just as I was about to leave the suite, one of the bridesmaids, Sophie, came rushing in with a frantic look on her face. "Hey, is everything okay with you and Jack?" she asked, her voice a little too hesitant. I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Of course, everything's fine." She hesitated again. "I don't want to alarm you, but I saw something odd. Jack, he's in the library with someone. And it looks like more than just a conversation." My stomach dropped. Sophie wasn't the kind of person to exaggerate, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear more. I shook my head, trying to stay calm. "What are you talking about?" "Jack wouldn't... Look, I could be wrong, but I thought you should know. You should probably go check on him." I was already moving before she finished. My heart was pounding in my chest. Was Sophie really suggesting that Jack was with another woman? The man I was about to marry? It didn't make sense. I had to see it for myself. I made my way through the grand hallways of the estate, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. My breath was shallow, my mind racing with a million scenarios, none of which I wanted to be true. As I passed the open doors to the library, I paused. The room was dimly lit, but through the gap, I could see Jack. He was sitting on one of the plush chairs, his arm around someone. A woman. I felt a coldness wash over me. The woman's face was hidden, but her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders. She was laughing at something Jack had said. He leaned in closer, and I could hear the faint sound of their voices. My body froze. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not today. I stepped back, trying to hide in the shadows, my heart beating out of my chest. I was close enough to hear them now, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything?" the woman asked, her voice low and flirtatious. "No, she's completely clueless. It's the perfect setup," Jack replied, his voice filled with confidence. "By the time she finds out, It'll be too late. The words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't breathe. The reality of the situation was sinking in. My fiancé, my soon-to-be husband, was cheating on me hours before our wedding. And not just with anyone. The woman he was with was someone I didn't recognize, someone I hadn't heard of before. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, completely paralyzed by disbelief. I wanted to storm into that room, confront him right then and there. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to have all the facts before I did anything rash. I quietly backed away from the door, retreating to a nearby hallway. I was shaking now, but I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not today. Not ever. As I walked away, I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront him now, ruin the wedding, and expose him for what he was. Or I could do something far more powerful. I could strike back. I could show him that he didn't get to have his cake and eat it too. He wasn't going to walk out of this unscathed. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. I barely spoke to anyone, my mind consumed with the conversation I'd overheard. I had a plan, but I needed to make sure it was foolproof. When the time came, I took a deep breath and walked toward the chapel. I could hear the soft hum of music, the guests taking their seats, and the wedding coordinator making last-minute adjustments. Jack's family was already seated, and I knew they were all eagerly waiting for the ceremony to start. But I wasn't about to marry a man who had betrayed me. Not like this. I paused just outside the chapel, the doors slightly ajar. My bridesmaids, who had been excited for this day, were now standing by, completely unaware of what I knew. But I had to make my move before I lost my nerve. I turned to Sophie, the only one who knew the truth. "Tell everyone to go inside," I whispered, "but hold off on starting the ceremony for a few more minutes." Sophie looked confused but nodded. She didn't know what had happened, but she could tell something was off. I could see it in her eyes. When everyone was seated, I walked into the chapel. I stood at the altar, the guests' eyes on me, but my focus was on Jack. He was standing there, looking dashing in his tuxedo, but there was an almost cocky air about him that made my blood boil. He hadn't a clue what was coming. The officiant began the ceremony, but I wasn't listening to his words. I was too focused on Jack and the woman he had betrayed me with. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I had to keep it together, just for a moment longer. When the time was right, I spoke. "I'm sorry, everyone, but I can't go through with this wedding. Not like this." The gasps from the guests were immediate. Jack's face paled and he turned to look at me, confusion filling his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice faltering for the first time. "You want to know why I can't go through with it?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. "Because I know about her," I said, nodding toward the woman in the back of the room. "And I overheard everything." Jack's expression shifted, but it wasn't guilt or shame. It was fear. The fear that I wasn't going to let this slide. "I'm not the fool you think I am," I continued. "You thought you could play both sides, but you're not going to get away with it. Not today." And just like that, the wedding was over. I walked away from the altar, leaving behind the man who had shattered my trust. His family was left in stunned silence, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him ruin my life any more than he already had. As for Jack, he never got a chance to explain. And I didn't want to hear it. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The wedding wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined, but it was my reality. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting back at someone. It's about walking away from the things that don't serve you and taking control of your own happiness. And that's exactly what I did.